is Semiramis. Again, the depiction. Now, when you start to look around the ancient world, it seems to be just an explosion of gods and goddesses under different names and stuff like this. There's a goddess of this and the goddess of that and the goddess of the other. Oh my goodness, so complicated. I can't follow this. Once you realize that as this Babylonian Trinity religion moved through Europe, all they did was take that and use different names for the same deities. So all across Europe and the wider world, you see all these deities and goddesses and gods under different names, but they're the same deities, the Babylonian deities, just called different names. And one of them is Europa, the goddess Europa. That's what Europe is named after. Now, we've talked before about the obsession that these bloodlines have with symbolism. Well, it just so happens that one of the key symbols for the Babylonian goddess under different names is 12 stars in a circle, which just happens to be, sits back in amazement, the symbol of the European Union. Who decided that was going to be the symbol of the European Union? Those that manipulated into place the European community, which became the Union. And of course, it's the symbol of their goddess, in this case, Europa. And so they use their symbol right at the heart of the logo of the European Union. And that is saying something. That is saying this is the realm or the union of the Babylonian goddess, which represents, symbolizes these bloodlines and their control. And when you look at the ancient stories about Europa, who again is Semiramis under a different name, they tell the story of how she, as a woman, rode on the back of this bull, which is a symbol of Nimrod. So it's Europa Semiramis riding on Nimrod. And in 2005, the European Union brought out a commemorative coin which depicted Europa and the bull, Semiramis and Nimrod from Babylon, on it. And the people behind that knew exactly what they were symbolizing. And so we now have this situation where this organization, which was created by these bloodlines, really at the heart of it, the Habsburgs, which connect into the Rothschilds, etc., they've set basically a fishing net or a spider's web. You can symbolize it in many ways. And there it sits. And then countries come in and they get caught in the web. And once they get caught in the web, the legislative laws, rules and regulations of that country immediately start to change dramatically and come under European law. And then everything is so connected to everything else in Europe that even if anybody already wanted to get out, they are so glued to the European Union structure by then through finance and business and all the rest of it, they can't get out. So what I would say to the people of Croatia, you are making a forever decision here, certainly forever in the terms of lifespans that we're talking about, going into the European Union. Because once you're in, if you're saying, oh, we don't like this, let's get out, oh, forget that. Because you're going to be in the web so fast legislatively and in terms of dependency that there is no, oh, let's get out. So again, when you put all this together, this is happening in this country, certainly at a political level, with absolutely no debate. Okay, let's see the good things and let's see these other things. No, oh, we're just going in. Over the cliff.
Na predavanju u Zagrebu pokazali ste neke fotografije zastave Europske unije u Zagrebu i drugdje. Zanima me gdje ste ih uslikali i na koji način biste zapravo opisali kako se ulazak u Europsku uniju održava na svakodnevni život ljudi?
Well,
pretpostavljam da imate nešto iskustva.
it's strange to me. Well, not strange because I know how the system works, but it's amazing to me, if I didn't know how the system worked, that I look around Zagreb at parliament buildings and government buildings, and what I see is next to the Croatian flag, I see the European Union flag flying next to it. Croatia's not even in the European Union yet, and I understand this has been going on for quite a time. And what that is symbolic of is that this is a done deal. You know, there is an agenda to enslave through this union every country in Europe, and further out. They want to expand as far out as they can. And this is not we will try to persuade people that it's good to join the European Union. This agenda is you're going to join. And by the way, we're not going to persuade you to agree to more and more centralization of power in Europe. We are going to do it, okay? And we're seeing this now in Ireland. To keep this thing moving, they had to have get-out clauses in the early days so that people were a bit more comfortable about going in. For instance, I mentioned earlier the veto. If you go into a union of nations, and at least you know you have a veto, if the union decides something that is going to adversely affect your country, or it's something you don't want, you have this veto. You can say, no, I'm blocking that, and I have the power to do. Now, that was to get people in and moving. Now, they're, like I say, removing the veto. So eventually, the bureaucracy in Brussels will be a dictatorship with no way of overcoming that and denying its omnipotence. One of those checks and balances up to this point, and they're about to destroy this, was that major constitutional changes, etc., had to be agreed by every nation for them in the Union to become law. And the idea was that, well, we're going to control the people in the governments of the nations, so it's not a problem. We'll give them that, but it's not really a check and balance because we'll get the government to agree to do what we ask. But on one or two occasions, there was one in Holland, there was one in France, and more recently in Ireland, those countries had referendums giving the people the opportunity to vote on whether they wanted to give still more centralized power to the European Union. So they wanted to bring in this, what they now call the Lisbon Treaty. But it was originally called the European Constitution. So the Dutch and the French in their referendums voted against the Constitution and said, no, we don't want it. Now, because of this law, which they're now getting rid of, that meant the Constitution couldn't happen. So what did they do? They took 98%, this is from European Union people, 98% of what that Constitution said, and they called it not a constitution, they called it a treaty, the Lisbon Treaty. And those countries that had promised their people a referendum on the Constitution, like Britain, and the British government knows if it had a vote, a referendum on the Constitution, they'd lose. So what they then said is, oh no, we don't have to keep our promise anymore to give you a referendum on the Constitution because the Constitution's dead. It's just the treaty now. And we didn't promise we'd give you a referendum on the treaty, but the Constitution. So that's how they get round it. And they've got round that by saying, oh no, the Dutch and the French, they voted against the Constitution. We're now talking about this treaty, which is just 98% of the Constitution, right? So now we come to the Irish, and a very wealthy man funded a campaign in Ireland to let the Irish people see far more about the real background to the European Union than they would normally get. The Irish voted against having this treaty happen. So in a democracy, which of course the European Union isn't, it's a farce, you would say, well, that's you know, we did our best, but the Irish have vetoed. No, they're now pressing the Irish, and you watch